Many people have reported that they had an encounter with a frightening, dark shadow man who is wearing an old hat. The so-called Hatman always seems to invoke intense fear and fright when seen by witnesses. In this video, we want to take a look at some real accounts of Hatman sightings. And please take a second to subscribe to my channel Frostmare and hit the bell notification icon to never miss any of my new creepy uploads. I only just found out about the Hatman yesterday, and at first I didn't react so much to the stories I've read, but then something came back to me that happened to me as a child. I was 9 or 10 years old and very lonely, and I used to walk around my neighborhood on my own, just admiring nature. So one day in broad daylight, I was walking down the street, and for some reason I stopped outside one of the apartment's basement window because I noticed something in the corner of my eye. So I turned to look inside, and there stood a tall, thin old man with a black top hat and all dressed in black. At first, I could only see him in profile, but he must have known I was looking at him because he slowly turned to me and looked up, and all I could see and remember was the creepiest smile I've ever seen and big hollow eyes staring at me. He looked so evil and unreal. I froze at first, too afraid to move, but then I just ran as fast as I could down the street, crying my eyes out. I never walked past that window again. I was sitting on my couch, watching TV and dozing. I felt like someone was watching me, so I opened my eyes. There was a black figure wearing a trench-like coat and a hat, and it was reaching out its arm with its index finger pointing towards me as if it was going to touch me. Then it disappeared. I wasn't afraid of it. It just seemed curious. This happened while I was in the process of moving out of my first apartment about 30 years ago. It was the first place I rented all by myself, and I had lots of odd experiences there, but that's another story. I remember I was there moving the last boxes out by myself one night, and I swear I had been seeing things out of the corner of my eye all day, like shadows or silhouettes. I have always been skeptical though, and just assumed my eyes are playing tricks on me. Anyways, I remember I knocked over this old German sword that I had stored in my bedroom, and when I bent over to pick it up, it's like I felt this presence behind me. You can tell when someone is directly behind you, and that's exactly how I felt. At the same time, I recall I felt cold all over. It could be that I was just freaking out for no reason, but I swear the temperature dropped, like people say, cold spots. I turned around, but there was no one there. My kitchen still felt very cold. For some reason, I saw a disposable camera that I had left on the counter and thought that I would snap a picture of my bedroom doorway where I had just been standing. I don't know where I got that idea from. I must have seen it in some scary movie. When I was developing the film, I nearly crapped myself. I hadn't heard anyone talking about the Hatman until much later in the mid-2000s, but I believe this is exactly who I met. Here's the picture in question. A while before my grandmother passed away, she decided to stop taking all of her medications. She ended up in the hospital and hallucinated quite a bit. So maybe this was just a hallucination, but she told me she saw a tall, thin man with a top hat in the corner of her room. She said his head would slide up and down the wall. Maybe this isn't paranormal. I had a long, involved bout sleep paralysis in my early 20s. I'm 41 now. I had been experiencing sleep paralysis pretty often and had seen the shadow people on several occasions. One night I woke up to sleep paralysis, to them circling my bed. They moved faster and faster until they became a blur. Then I saw one that wasn't moving within the circle, but he was hovering over my bed, wearing a top hat. When he saw that I saw him, he aggressively got in my face and moved his head around mine, like he was trying to smell me or something. I struggled and struggled to wake up, then I suppose you would say came out of my body, but it felt as heavy, like my astral body was made out of metal. So I rolled and fell onto the floor. I saw, sitting on the floor, cross-legged, what looked to be an apparition of myself when I was young. I was full color, but transparent, sort of like a hologram. My younger self, or holographic apparition, said to me, "Be careful," or "It's going to be okay," or maybe both. The message was unclear. I crawled into my mother's room, and she was laying in the bed, propped up on a bunch of pillows. But my dad wasn't in bed with her. I told her I was scared. She said, "Me too." I said, "I had a bad dream." She said, "So did I." I replied, "What did you dream about?" At this point, she lifted the covers on my dad's side of the bed. I got in the bed with her, and she lifted my arm into the air. At this point, I actually woke up from the sleep paralysis, and my arm was in the air. I stayed up the rest of the night freaking out, because I knew the dream must have meant something. About a week later, one early morning, a neighbor woke me up and told me my father was outside being taken by the ambulance because he was having a bad disease spell. I got dressed and went outside. They were loading him at this point, and all I saw were his feet. As soon as I saw his feet, I knew he was about to die. Everyone else said, "No, he was just dizzy." We got to the hospital, and about half an hour later, we found out that a blood clot hit the back of his brainstem. Choices were allow him to live the remainder of his life as a vegetable or cut off his life support. We cut off the life support. Was this all a coincidence? Who can say? My only experience so far with the shadow figure was a few years ago at a friend's house. I was on the couch watching TV with the lights on, and my friend was in his room doing something. I look over to my left, and there against the wall is a shadow figure of a man about 6 feet tall. I'm just looking at him, and he's looking back at me. He turns his head away and starts seamlessly moving towards the hall. I get off the couch to go after him and watch him disappear through the cracks of the door. I'm only mentioning this because he had a hat on, not a top hat or a fedora. It had a front bill, but didn't look like a baseball hat. Maybe a newsboy cap? This is my first post on Reddit. I've been reading paranormal stories for months, after a friend said I should post my stories here. I've had many paranormal weird experiences in my life, but this was one of the most memorable. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you liked this episode. If you have your own creepy stories to share, please send me an email. You can leave a like and subscribe to my channel. Stay frosty.